All right, welcome to patch 13.17. My name is Chris, and joined by my longtime patch review duo partner is Jason.
Great to be back here with you for another video, Chrissy. Have you heard the rumor that they're going to get rid of mythic items next season?
I have not heard that rumor, but it doesn't surprise me since we've had them for 2 years, so they need to go. Because the game is just in constant flux because that's how they rationalize keeping the game fresh.
Yeah, I believe that a couple of the rioters have actually commented on it and basically said they are considering it.
I'll be honest, I never liked the idea of forcing you to buy like one thing that doesn't let you buy all the other things. Even if
Yeah,
they downgraded all the mythics to legendary power status,
that's what they might do.
I would be okay with that as long
Uh-huh.
as they upgrade. It seems like if they did do that, they would need to buff all the legendaries because obviously none of them are close to mythic power.
Right, and part of it is just like the mythic passives. They could obviously get rid of those, but yeah, even if you did
Eh.
that, I think to do some balancing there.
Yeah, the synergies were always kind of an afterthought.
I always thought that mythics were a really good idea in terms of like you choose I want this type of power for this game, and I think mythics do that better than most of the other items, which usually just kind of like conform to your champ. Um, but yeah, it's like they tried for it, they got a few of them right, they got a lot of them wrong. They did a few reworks, they got even more of them wrong. I think they're just tired of trying.
I don't believe you.
All right, should we hop into 1317 after I waylaid it on minute one?
I think they. I think that the mythics are like a wedge issue, so they have something to constantly fiddle with.
Yeah, I could buy that.
Okay, first up, we got Aatrox. Passive and his CC ability on his W are both changing from physical to magic. I don't think I actually have a problem with this, especially. I think it's fine that I don't know why they did this. I guess it just widens his damage profile. It's probably really impactful on his passive because it does max health damage. It's going to be a complete afterthought on his W, though. So that ability doesn't do any damage to begin with.
This is very weird to me, yeah. I don't see any reason Aatrox is the type of champ that you should not be allowed to build against. I guess you can already build Grievous Wounds, but in terms of protecting yourself from the sometimes ridiculous amount of damage that he puts out, I
Yeah,
see no. Yeah.
but if when he was first reworked and it was already like this, we wouldn't even really be talking about it.
Well, I always applaud when they line up a champ's skills damage type with what that champ usually does. I think that allows for more interesting counterplay and itemization in League. They've been doing a bunch of that, and now they seem to be doing the reverse with Aatrox.
If it was like his Q, it'd be a big
Hmm.
discussion. But since it's just his passive and the
Yeah,
W, the W change is meaningless. The passive
that's
hits
true.
harder.
The Q is where a lot of the damage is coming out from. Yeah, I'm not gonna die on this hill, but I don't like this.
Uh, I don't think I have a problem with it. I think his passive is more magic-y, so maybe in some part of my mind it doesn't bother me as much. Obviously, this is going to hurt his crazy greedy lethality and heavy pen builds and stuff. So what
What
can
would
you
you
do?
say is the champion League of Legends that like you always forget what their damage type is because intuitively it should be the other type?
It's funny you mentioned that. That never happens to me because I'm just so
Uh,
used to knowing like the numbers on the
uh,
stats champ. But my friend Matt, he always is asking me if they do magic or physical because he feels like a champion. He like for a long time he thought Alawi only did magic damage because it looks
oh
so
yeah,
magical or whatever. And I'm
yeah,
like,
just pulling
and then
spirits and whatever.
he explained to me his argument that well, if it looks like they're doing something magical, it should be magic damage. That's why I think Pantheon does physical damage and Alawi does magic damage. I'm like, I never really thought of it basing it on something like that.
To some extent, he's got a point, and then to another extent, you have to look at like the role they play in the game. Generally, if you have a champ that's going to want to play mid, more often you're going to want to make them magic damage, so that other people can still play ADCs and whatever.
But no, other
Yeah.
than like the hybrid champions like Akali or Jax or something, I never really thought about them needing to be one or the other because of the way they look.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like if
Um,
Jax was full physical, that would make as much sense to me as he is now. You know.
yeah, I think that would be fine, and it's also probably okay as it is now. Warwick's the one that took me years to learn. I always like just like intuitively, he's slashing at you. He's running at you and he's
Yeah.
slashing you.
If
Like
he
you
was
should be
full,
doing
yeah,
no
if he was
damage.
full physical, I'd have the same opinion as like Jax too.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's better that he's
Then
not though, to be honest.
lately I get like I find myself getting confused by Katarina sometimes. Like I guess talking about it, I know that she is magic damage, but like there's like so many builds with her with AD that I
Yes,
always have to
but
check myself.
even if they do on hit damage,
Yeah,
the abilities scale as magic damage. So no amount of
definitely.
even though they all have AD ratios, it doesn't
Uh-huh.
matter that you build AD items because the abilities
Right.
do magic damage.
But it's like I look over to the scoreboard, I'm like, yep, yep, AD, 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 and then I have to check myself and be like, wait a minute, no, Katarina's skills are all physical, all magic damage. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the Bork talking.
You ain't wrong.
Okay, next up we got action. Not a lot to say here. Just some stat changes. I honestly think Action's one of the worst designed champs they ever put out. I think he's really missed the mark.
In what way?
I just feel like his kit, a lot like Renata, I feel like his kit doesn't really, go together very
Many
well. He
incoherent
doesn't.
things.
Yes, he feels like he just has lots of random things. I feel like they started with Vayne's model and then just modified Vayne's model. If you watch, they both move very similar.
Uh,
I feel like he's just kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different ideas that don't go together really well.
I feel like most of his kit, like, even though thematically and maybe like if you would read it in text, doesn't seem like it has any thought behind it. I feel like the gameplay actually works well together between his skills, with the exception of his ultimate. His ultimate really should be on another champ instead.
And he should be invisible too.
Yeah, I think the invisibility actually, allows him to make kind of like a daring kill that can revive teammates. I feel like there is some gameplay logic to everything in his kit, except maybe that ult.
I'd be happy with him getting a rework.
Just my opinion, but I definitely see what you're saying, especially if you were just kind of look at his kit as a design or in text, rather than following like the flow of the gameplay. I'm with you.
All right, we need to
Anyway, as
start.
far as what actually happened to Akshan here, small buffs, I would say. A little bit less. Okay, so they actually did this with a few of like the kind of roamy, squishy champs in this patch. They gave them more durability and less spike damage, or even less damage in general. Um,
All right, since you addressed that, we'll just
I
skip
don't
over
know.
all
I
the
would
other
say this
stat
is
changes.
actually looking at it maybe a second time. Eh, I know you hate this for.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it sounded like you were out for a minute though.
Yes, I was. I said since we talked about this stat change, we don't have to talk about all the other stat changes in this patch. Something like that.
I do actually think that like some of them we'll get to like Quinn later, are more significant.
All right. Okay, next up we got Blitzcrank, and if there was something for me to be emotional about, it would probably be these changes. We got some pullback on some of the cool stuff he had before. I really don't even know what the rationale behind any of this was. I sure don't think he was too strong, especially the W changes on Overdrive. I really liked the on-hit magic damage. He's losing that. I mean, it's just... Yeah, they're nerfing his passive. His ultimate's getting mana scaling. I don't know. It just feels all over the place. Doesn't feel like this was meant to do something specific.
Yeah, this whole set was a little bit weird to me. Almost feels like they watched our champion judgment from 2 months ago and said, "Hey, they're right. We should change Blitzcrank to be more meaningful." And they just got it wrong. They just got it wrong here. The one thing I will say I think is reasonable is that Blitzcrank really, in no way, shape, or form, is the type of champion that builds attack speed that wants to be attacking a bunch of times in a row. So to pull back on that and then to give him some advantages on things like mana and early game durability, because Blitzcrank really does make most of his impact in the early game, feels like it will help him, in my opinion. Getting a stronger mana shield, mana barrier, or shield in those first few levels so that he can make the pull and then like maybe pull off a 1 for 0 instead of a 1 for 1 in laning phase. As well as more base health and resists. Just having slightly lower mana costs. He really does struggle with mana in the early game if you're optimistic with the grabs. This will help him. I don't think that this is going to change a lot, but I do think it does make his early game a little bit better. Yeah.
So they pull back on his overdrive power, but then give his passive effect on static field a mana ratio, which
I agree,
you have to use auto attacks to proc.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little bit weird. But I think maybe what they're going for is for your first, like, maybe like 2 hits on the champion before you either kill them or they get away. You can do a little bit more spike damage that way. The Power Fist AD ratio was increased. Like, I think this is meant to help him, particularly at the beginning of the game. Something I tried, saw a few other people trying, and it did work well sometimes. In Arena, rest in peace, Arena. We really hope you come back. Was full AP Blitzcrank, and I don't know that it would work that well in like a real game of League. It might have some merit. I don't know. So sad to see such a big AP ratio go on Power Fist, but that was against non-champions anyway. Yeah, Blitz is just one of those champs that's a little bit weird since there's nothing great to build on him. You can go speed, you can go tankiness. There's not really anything good to build on him.
I feel like this champion has so much room for buffs that would not make him really broken in any way.
I would like to see him buffed in the late game in particular, but I almost think like with a champ like this, how do you do it? You'd have to rework a few things about just how he plays the game. You would need to go a lot further than this.
So what you're saying is he needs a rework.
I am saying that he needs a rework. Yes.
Okie dokie. Next up. Next up we got Elise, one of the oddest champions in the game. We have some more on-hit magic damage while she's in spider form, and more heal from her auto attacks while in spider form. These numbers were already utterly pathetic, so this is nice, but you're really only going to notice this in the jungle when her spiderlings tank for her and she's allowed to more easily sustain off of the camps and stuff. It's on hit though and not lifesteal or whatever, so you'll always get the full amount from this. So that's kind of nice. And then her CC ability that does no damage lasts for a pretty significant amount longer, which is nice because it's kind of her whole playmaking ability. The rest of her shit basically just doesn't land if she doesn't land this first.
Yeah, I forget where she maxes Cocoon, but 2.4 seconds at max rank is nothing to sneeze at for a stun.
Well, they have buffed this duration a number of times. Now you can probably just leave this at level 1, because that's definitely long enough for her to do her Q, her volatile spiderling, and then transform to do the EQ again. So
yeah,
you can probably leave this at level 1. It's just fine.
What is the Cocoon paired with in spider form?
Repel. It's her W and her Q that are the damage abilities.
Yeah.
But she needs Repel to gap close to do the Q if the Cocoon's too far away. So
that's true. I do think that even 2 damage and 2 heal on every hit in those early levels is nice. It will help her jungling. It will even help some of the early skirmishes she might have to take in the jungle. I agree with you, it's not world breaking. But these are some nice buffs to Elise, who has been irrelevant for a long time. She was the bee's knees back in Season 3. And then she was irrelevant for a while. And then for that little while that AP junglers, like AP spike junglers, were really popular. you'd see a bunch of full AP Elise in the jungle, and she was popular and fairly good.
I
And that
think,
fell out of
yeah,
favor, and we haven't seen much of her since.
I think she's just a better version of Nidalee, and that's a compliment and an insult because Nidalee's
Yeah,
still very bad. Thing is,
it's damning by faint praise, right?
she's more consistent than Nidalee, but has all the same
Mhm.
weaknesses. She's basically she relies too much on like catch potential, like Zoe. You know, she kind of has to wait in a bush. If she gets you in a bush, she can 100 to 0 you. She's gotten a lot of buffs over the
Yeah.
years, and they have really increased her essentially assassin like potential
Yep.
through like AP and damage ratios and stuff like that. But she's so like bush and cocoon dependent that she rarely has all the same weaknesses as Nidalee.
Yes, with the notable and major exception of she has a 2+second stun. So, Nidalee doesn't have that.
Yes, but think of the cocoon as like her
Uh,
Nidalee spear. She needs it to set up the rest of her kit.
sure, but she can also use it for a lot of other reasons, including protecting her team. No Nidalee can do that.
Yep. And the repel gives her something Nidalee sorely lacks.
Nidalee sorely lacks so many things.
Okay, next up we got Gnar, and these are
Mhm.
specifically buffs to Mega Gnar's abilities,
Yes.
where it does not say boomerang. This is boulder toss. And I'm fine with this. I feel like his Mega Gnar abilities are only slightly stronger actually than his regular abilities. Wallop in particular is the little stun he does in a line. Yeah, it's basically just for the CC, so a little buff on both of these. All of his abilities have really good scaling, so the Boulder Toss in particular is probably going to be pretty nice now. It has brilliant scaling, just like his Boomerang Toss does. So this is
Yeah,
nice.
I agree. This is nice. I don't see Nar too often. Honestly, not even often enough to get a feel for whether he needs buffs, but he probably does. That's probably why I don't see him that often.
But you got to be careful
Um,
with him because there's a lot of ways to build him as like a super annoying split pusher with like no
yeah,
intention of really going tank.
yeah,
And
particularly when he's able to kind of like repeatedly peck you as mini Nar.
yeah, his like Ginsu's abuse with his W, similar to Vayne's W, can be really obnoxious
Yeah,
on the
so this
side
feels like a
lane.
good place to buff Nar on the Mega Nar form.
If it was up to me, I would just buff the hell out of the bonus stats he gains when he goes into Mega Gnar and then leave all this shit the same. Because he gains a ton
Um,
of max health, armor, MR, and AD when he
yeah,
transforms.
that would certainly also make his abilities more powerful just based on the scalings, but I like rewarding actually hitting the skills.
Okay, next up we got Hecarim. This champ's been in constant flux for like the last 2 years, ever since he received scalings on some of his long-time abilities that never had scalings. Especially his Spirit of Dread, which has been monstrous sustain ever since they gave it
Hmm.
percentages instead of flat, and then damage ratios, and then you heal off your allies' damage as well. So much of this has been pulled back on in the last 2 years, and he's also received buffs towards like his ultimate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's still going to be good. He's still going to fall off late game. He's still going to be a monster in the mid game. I am always depressed over these W changes because it is such a cool ability, I think. The rest of the stuff, take it or leave it. I don't really care. The Spirit of Dread, I feel like it's a lot like Gwen's Mist thing. I feel like it's kind of, I don't know, it's something I don't think that should be messed with because it needs this for like the survivability. But no
Yeah,
more scaling and less healing. So
you have stronger thoughts on this than I do, I think. They've done so much with the mana here in different directions. It feels like it's a slight buff in general to the mana, serious nerf to his sustain in the fights, and overall that would be a nerf. Pretty much anytime you see heal reduction on a champion, unless you see like a big damage or base durability increase to compensate for it, that's a nerf.
this is definitely a nerf.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, scroll all the way down to Kayn, and we've got some pretty big nerfs here. I don't like this. Kane is someone, and we talk about this every time his Q gets a nerf too. Kane is someone who is so dependent on these absurdly high AD ratios with such low cooldowns. This is really going to hit him hard. This is one of his like just monstrous abilities because it's also an area of effect ability and it has really high base numbers too. This is his like slow and or knock up when he's in Rost.
Yeah, you can imagine like 200,
Yeah.
250 bonus AD, by the time you reach the end of the game. I mean, you're talking, 40 to 50 damage every time he hits that skill.
Yeah, I don't know where all these Kane damage nerfs are coming from. It's always been about the sustain with him. You really can't. I think he's one of the most balanced champions they honestly have ever made, and one of the most well designed, in my opinion, too. I'm a big fan. He's not one of my favorite to play, but I am a big fan of the champion. I personally think he's in a really good spot, and aside from tweaking with his like Rost healing numbers, I think his damage profile should be left untouched for the rest of time.
And then you have this, frankly, I think pretty irrelevant unless I'm missing something. New effect
It is completely
where
irrelevant.
where he transforms, it fully restores his health and mana. He can transform outside of base, right? Or no?
No, he has to be in the fountain to
He has
do
to be in
that.
the base, so that's just stupid. Then that's just like basically a that's just basically almost like a lore or like animation type of thing that they're giving you. That's stupid.
I guess the thought would be if you recalled and you were like literally almost dead and then you did it, you wouldn't have to wait a few more seconds for the fountain to
Yeah,
top you off.
that, who cares? And why would they only do that once? Like, if they really want to make that a thing for them, just let them do that all the time as like a bonus little passive. Yeah, that's pretty stupid. If you're playing an RPG and you level up and it fully restores your health and mana, that feels good. I
Yeah,
don't know that you're gonna do it in an ARAM where you have to be in base to get it in the first place.
yeah, meaningless.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's almost an insult after what they just did to his bonus AD ratio.
next up, we got Kha'Zix. We got a slight nerf to the base AD ratio of Taste Their Fear. This is not.
Bonus AD bonus.
Well, I meant base because this is the original value and not the amplified value from the isolation damage of Taste Their
Oh,
Fear. But
got it,
I
got it.
didn't. Yeah, I know what you meant though. So this does not take into account the bonus. This will affect the bonus damage he gets from Taste Their Fear because it simply increases the ratio.
Yeah.
But it's not so much. And if you know anything about the numbers on Kha'Zix and just he does absolutely absurd damage. And when he evolves his Q, it also reduces the cooldown on his Q by quite a significant amount. This literally goes down to like 2 or 3 seconds. So this is I don't know if I'd say it's warranted, but he has such disgusting kill potential with his Q that it's probably not going to feel it too much.
Yeah, I mean, assassins are strong right now. Kha'Zix is one of the strongest assassins in the game, and he's been in a strong place. This is not like a terrible nerf. It's a slight nerf that I think was warranted.
All right, next up we got Kindred, and I do actually think this is a terrible nerf. This is like her one ability that actually hits like a truck. Her other abilities are purely like utilitarian and not for the damage whatsoever. This is the one thing she's got that makes her like a real threat in the late game. This like execution damage that this is only the base amount. It doesn't include here the scaling this ability gets from critical strike. The missing health execution on this can get pretty high when you start getting like 60, 80, 100% critical strike in the late game. The slow, as long as it's above like 25, 30, that's fine because she'll always have the chase potential. But nerfing the health ratio on this, I think, is a big no-no. She's going to need a lot of extra, or she's going to need like 3 hunts to bring this back up to 8%. And if you know anything about Kindred, you're lucky to get 10 over the course of the whole game.
Yeah, like this is pretty sad. For the first time in my memory, Kindred has actually been like a champ that I don't even mind having that on my team that much. Because sometimes she does decent, even though sometimes she doesn't. Um, And I guess Riot saw, hey, sometimes Kindred's doing decent. Better nerf her back to hell.
I still don't want her on my team, but
Bye, Kindred.
I would not dispute her damage output in the late game. The combination of the bonus
so
from
quickly, and you know, even if she's about to kill someone, she often has to just like proc or ult because she's about to die.
Yes, but the combination of the bonus execution damage from her hunts and the synergy with critical strikes makes this Mounting Dread ability hit like a truck in the late game. And
I don't disagree that she can do damage late game, but I think she really is just an early game only type of champ.
I don't want her. Yeah,
continues to dominate and get marks. Honestly, what I think is probably happening is that you know, like has always been the case with Kindred, probably in very high elo and organized play, she's probably been a menace. You know, now that she's actually been like adequate in lower level play. So, you know, they probably are just trying to make sure that she's not just completely dominating, you know, challenger and professional play.
If it was up to me, I would.
They really need to rework. She's cool, but it's just like there's way too much of a disparity between unskilled, skilled, and professional play.
I don't think she needs like a full-on rework. I think she needs a few tweaks to make her more appealing to take bot lane.
You want to see her brought back as an ADC?
I think she is an ADC. Make no mistake.
As a well, she's a marksman. Okay, yeah, you could call her an ADC. As you want to see her brought back as a laner, is what you're saying, rather than a jungler.
I think she could be a competent laner now. I mean, if you really think about it, why can't you take Quinn or like Action bot lane? There's really no real reason. Not when there's much weaker laners that normally go bot lane. You know, we just don't do it because nobody does it. You know, and nobody wants to get reported for playing Quinn bot, even though she's probably not bad at all.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're not going to bring as much as a Caitlyn or an Ashe or a Jinx or a Kai'Sa will once they scale up.
Kindred's a hyper carry.
Kindred is in that twilight zone where it's like if she has a lot of success, she can be that. Quinn is never going to be able to do that, and Akshan probably can't get enough distance to be the type of person that you'd actually be able to protect once he gets into the fights. Akshan I could see more than Quinn.
Anyway, what a bummer.
Yeah, like, you know, unless you're, you know, a very high elo player, just don't bother with Kindred now. They just kneecap the champ that was already poor.
Next up, we got some changes for Lux. This champion usually gets like 3 buffs every year for like the last 10 years.
And 3 skins every year as well.
Yes, we've got less mana. We got a pretty juicy buff on her passive. Part of her kit you can't really afford to use as much outside of the laning phase just because of how hit or miss her gameplay tends to be. And then we got a buff on her Q. And then a slight nerf on her E, which is going to definitely hurt her support game and her like annoying mid lane harass, but it's not horrible.
Yeah, it's 5 damage. Sorry, go on.
That's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, it's 5 damage on the E. You're getting considerably more damage because of the AP ratios on the passive.
That's if you can afford to do the auto attack.
Well, you don't. It's not just on the auto attack. It's also on her ult. Her ult will also proc elimination.
Yeah, but you can't think about her kit just in terms of always being able to follow up with her ultimate.
No, but basically, you know, anytime Lux wants to full combo you, she will be using her ultimate. It's not like it has a long cooldown. I actually think that the buff to the Q here, though, the skill that you're generally gonna max second, is pretty big. Light bonding is not only a really important tool for making the catches, where you throw out your Q and then you load the E and the ult on them to just burst someone from sometimes 100 to 0 if you're ahead. But it is also the skill that you're going to use if you have like a sticky opponent on you, either in your lane, you know, on a gank, or just in the middle of a team fight that's gone a little bit awry. You fire the Q at them, and often you're out clean. Like that's a really important skill to
Yeah.
have uptime on. I think this is actually pretty big, and overall a very nice buff to an already good champion.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say that Lux was like the first champion I made.
Yeah.
I actually have only played her like twice in like the last 5 years, though, probably.
What appealed to you about her in those
Uh,
first few seasons?
I think as I got older, and I also was a huge LeBlanc player when I was much
Yeah.
younger. The older I got, the more I realized how like one-dimensional and crude that her kit was, and how it just didn't.
That
The
just
older I
answers my
got,
question of what appealed to you about her in those first few seasons.
I don't know. I thought her abilities were cool. I
Uh-huh.
guess. I liked the shield, the wand thing. Always was like a cool thing. I don't know. She was easy back in the old days. She was like kind of easy to be relatively dominant mid lane with her because there was a
Yeah.
lot less mobility back then, and her range allowed her to do really well against most of the mages at the time.
Did she build DFG or what did she build?
You
What
gotta
was
be.
her first big item?
I don't remember. Back then, you would get like Athenes and then Morellos and then Ludens. It
Oh,
was a
nice.
long time ago, man.
You got all the themes one. All right.
Played her like a million times, like in season like 2 and 3 and 4 or whatever.
Nice.
Yeah, I just don't find her satisfying anymore. I kind of look at her like, I think I like Brand. When I look at her, I'm like, it's kind of just a cheesy champ now.
Yeah, one of my friends is just like an incredible Lux player, so
It's like I feel like it just doesn't say much, you know.
Um, I don't know. Like, I don't know too many people that incredible with any one champ. So when I see her just like throw a Q, just know it's gonna land, and immediately throw out the E and R, and the enemy is reduced to atoms. It's cool to watch. But I agree with you. She is a little one-dimensional.
Yeah, I
But
feel like
like, I
she's
think with
probably
these buffs,
more.
she's gonna be really, really good.
Say that again.
I think with these buffs, she's going to be really, really good in spite of being one-dimensional.
Oh, I think for like the last 3 years, have probably been a golden age for Lux with all the buffs she's gotten to her kit
Yeah,
and her ultimate. It's just insane.
yeah, she was already good.
I mean, when I played Lux, her ultimate had like a 60% AD ratio. What is it now? Like 120 or something? It's like insane.
Yeah, and it's got like an 8-second cooldown.
Yeah,
It's basically a basic ability that does ultimate damage.
it's pretty. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
silly.
All right, let's check out some well-deserved nerfs to Naafiri.
Yeah, nothing too insanely bad, I would say. Here we got a higher cooldown on when she regenerates a pack member. I don't think that's the hugest deal. The biggest deal is probably this damage on her Q, where you can repeat the damage to consume the bleed and do bonus damage on the second Q. This is definitely probably the most damning change, and the heal kind of blows too, since it's like her only form of sustain. That took a bit of a hit as well. Yeah, I'm not
The
100% sure this is definitely warranted. She is just kind of a Talon-esque champion, in my opinion, and if you lose that kind of persona, she doesn't really have anything to fall back on but her kill potential.
Well, when they say the minimum damage has gone down, what is the condition to make it not minimum damage on Darkened Daggers?
I think the minimum damage merely refers to the first cast only.
Okay, okay.
And then her little smaller dash, the one that doesn't like attach to you and lunge a million feet forward,
Uh-huh.
this works just like Kane's Q essentially. This one took a bit of a hit too, but
Uh-huh.
it's not really her bread and butter damage ability, so not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, just the long dash is so long, and then also the fact that like her damage once it actually comes at is pretty reliable. She has been an absolute monster mid. Speaking of the pack mates, actually, I remember when we were looking at the champ design, we were like, wish the pack mates did more. But what I found was when you're playing her mid, the pack mates are really good for if you can position correctly behind your pack mates for blocking skill shots from your lane opponent. Not so great in the jungle, except for actually just like clearing the jungle camps, but actually really important for basically no selling the enemy's skill shots in lane.
Yeah, I can see that, and I'm sure she's definitely cheesy enough to get on top of probably about half the mid laners. Yeah, I
Well, it's
can.
not just the mid laners. The reason she's such a terror mid is because she has such an easy time roaming and getting kills top and bot, and not even losing a lot for it because she's so fast.
Well, she doesn't gain any extra movement speed outside of her ultimate, so I don't think her roam
No,
potential is that much better.
she has a lot of dashes, and I think her wave clear is relatively good as well.
Uh, yeah, she's got dashes,
And then it doesn't
but
even take
wave
her a
clear
long time to
definitely
make
not
the
that
gank.
great.
It doesn't even take her a long time to make the gang. It's not like Galio, where yeah, you can get in there pretty quick, but then you usually have to stay in the fight for like 5-10 seconds. She just gets on a target, makes them bleed, runs back to mid lane, and they bleed out. Like, she actually has been a terror in mid lane and pretty good in the jungle.
I would say she's like a 5 or 6 out of 10. I'm not
In
willing
terms of
to,
like power level,
not power level because I feel
uh-huh.
like that would be different depending on the champ we're talking. I'm saying like balancedness.
Oh.
I don't feel
So
that
like 10 would be perfectly balanced. 5 would be
no, no,
like
no.
what?
Five would be perfectly balanced.
5
Zero
would be
would be
perfectly balanced.
underpowered. 10 would be broken. So
I feel like she's at about a 9.5 right now. I don't think I've consistently seen
nine
Champ
and a
had this
half.
much success in a year or two.
Nine and a
Any champ in
half.
the game. Yeah, 9.5.
I feel like
I mean, I,
she just doesn't do enough outside of like single target damage to be that disgusting. I mean, Talon has a lot of like the same strengths, and most people probably think he's relatively balanced.
I mean, 10, being maybe like Mordekaiser after the big Juggernaut rework.
Oh
It's
yeah,
probably like the
yeah,
most
yeah.
overpowered I can think of like a champ being in League history.
That was bad. I remember.
I feel like Nefiri. Okay, I guess if that's a 10, Nefiri might be singing it like an 8.5. But like, I really haven't seen a champ have this much consistent success in a very long time. Even the bad Nefiris, I usually see go about even.
Oh no! Before Aurelian's right as Aurelian Still was reworked, I think he was pretty good when he first came out. With
Okay.
how he stacked his thing up much faster when he first came out.
Yeah,
He
I
was
mean he was
pretty nasty.
powerful, but they nerfed him down pretty quickly.
Anyway,
Anyway,
we will agree to disagree. I think she's
fair enough.
relatively balanced.
I think she'll still be absolutely fine after these nerfs, and still strong probably.
Uh, I'm not so convinced, especially when I see the pack mates taking extra damage
That
from
doesn't sound
melee.
like agreeing to disagree to me.
Because yeah, you brought up we were complaining about the pack mate, or I was complaining
Uh-huh.
about the pack mates not being more central to her kit. And we
Yeah.
see here now they take double damage from melee champions. That's like the one thing I didn't want to see was like her pets being treated as like wards or spiderlings where they're just automatically executed by
Isn't
like
it weird
melee
that it's for
attacks.
melee champions though? That's just more of a reason for her to go mid instead of like jungle, where there aren't a lot of melee champions mid.
I think there's enough. You got like Yasuo, Yone, Echo, Fizz, Zed,
Yeah,
Talon, plenty of
yeah.
melee champs.
Pantheon now. There are a bunch, but I'm just surprised that that's what they decided to do.
Big mistake with that one, I think. Rest of it's hit or miss. Okay, next up we got Oriana. Just like Lux, but not as absurd. This champion has also been nerfed buffed a lot of times over the last
Yeah.
several years. She's been a mainstay of the scene since like her inception, but I think she's probably fallen off in popularity a lot. But in terms of her effectiveness, she'll always be on the highest tier of mid laners just because of her utility, team fight potential, low cooldowns. So more buffs, I guess, is good. I don't think she's a particularly dominant laner in the modern era because
Right.
of
She's
her
more of a
ball
scaler.
mechanic.
She's more
Yes.
of a scaler.
Yes,
Um,
but I would say she's probably the strongest of all of the slower scaling champs like Anivia, Twisted Fate, and all the boys,
Yeah, oh, Twisted Fate. You think of it as a scaling champ? Interesting.
Well, if he can't win laning phase and he has to roam, he's definitely waiting for something. So yeah, I think he's a scaling champ.
Um,
Not that he's a good one.
right. Like I feel like often if he's waiting, he's just waiting for a day that won't come.
Yes.
But yeah, 85 extra health at 18, 10 extra damage on the W, which is I think the skill that they basically change the damage and cooldown of the most.
Yes, but 30 more damage at level 9.
Oh yeah, that's only 10 at level 1. Yeah, 5 more for each level as well.
And
For
in the old days, the common thing
this
was
is a
to,
worthy buff.
in the old days, you would always max Q, but Q's base damage is kind of pathetic. And this, her W that combos with her Q, has been buffed a million times now. So I imagine these days you probably just max W because her Q already has a low cooldown, even with 1 point in it.
Yeah, I think W is the correct max on Ori lately. Q is not like absurd to do, but I think W is better. These buffs are probably mostly because of the assassin meta.
Yeah. All right.
Quinn.
Next up, we got Quinn. We got a nerf on her Q, which is kind of her bread and butter harass ability, and it's kind of like a big wave clear tool for her, as it does AoE damage for some reason. I don't know why. Seems kind of it's an odd ability. Probably she could not afford this nerf on either of these abilities with how dependent she is on like the drive-by cheese, and that is just predicated on the position she's found herself in the current era. I don't blame her for that. That just seems to be the only way people are willing to play her, with all either full lethality or all the on-hit vault cheese that people are willing to run on her, and she definitely can't afford these kind of nerfs if that's the playstyle people are going to index into.
I feel like on hit is the only way to play her, reasonably. She is getting 8 more health per level. You're talking about 120 to 140 at level 18. Compare that to 40 less damage in her full combo when she's ranked up both of these abilities. And you look at that and you say, well, 140 health versus 40 damage. It really depends on what you want to do with Quinn, right? Like, if you're continuing to like lane harass an opponent, particularly if you're going against like a Garen or someone like that isn't ever going to be able to catch you, the 40 damage less per combo probably hurts.
She doesn't have. That's her problem. That was like my point. There really only is one way to play her. She doesn't have the damage to push like most top laners, even the bruisers like out of lane. So that's why she has to roam so much. She's not as annoying as like Teemo, for instance, and the fact that she only does physical damage makes it easier for like top laners to itemize against her. She doesn't really have good enough harass to push people out of lane.
If it's a Chent that's never gonna catch you, she really can get in a lot of attacks, and she has to because, like, the second half of the Quinn game is just it's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still pretty bad. So yeah, you need to harass, you need to roam. There's just such a high execution requirement to actually play Quinn and not be a liability to your team. The fact that you are getting more health will allow you to kind of make those roams, cheese someone, and then by the time that their cavalry arrives and maybe hits you a few times, maybe you survive long enough to get out. I don't think this is necessarily a full nerf to her overall.
No, this is.
I think it really depends on how you play her.
There's really only one way to play her. You push your balls in top lane, and then you go roam, and then you hope that you hope that you either have the push, or you can get the laner to go back so you can leave.
I think that the health actually makes your roam a little bit safer to do when you actually take that fight. But yeah, 40 less damage on the combo, not great. Don't play this champ. She's not good.
Yes, this is definitely a champion you have to be way too active to get the most out of.
Yeah.
It's probably the best one. Next up, we've got Samira. 30 more health. Not a lot to say about that. I guess I could see this since she's like one of the lowest range AD carries, and she does get up close and personal probably more than almost any of the others. So
Yeah, her power has always
whoop-de-doo.
been so hard to read. Is she overpowered? Is she underpowered? Like, she can put out such ridiculous amounts of damage once she gets her ult and all ends you in the right place. Um, I've always had a really hard time figuring out where this champion's place is in terms of power and in terms of like the flow for your team.
Oh, she is an
It's
early
cool.
game. She's an early game monster, and she's like a late game
Can
flop.
be. And well, I don't think she's a late game flop at all. I've seen her 1v5 teams late game.
Yeah, if she's like the
Teams that were
last one
teams
to
that were
go.
ahead of her team, as long as she's ahead.
Yeah, if she's like the last one to go down and plays it just right, she can clean up really well. It's just late game, the fights, the damage is so fast that it just takes
Uh-huh.
her too long to activate her ultimate with all the little
Yeah,
things that she needs to do
that's
to turn it
true.
on.
And obviously, it's always nice to have ADCs with range in the late game. But
Yeah, exactly.
but
She's
yeah,
terrible against tanks. That's another good point, yeah.
can be so good. And 30 extra base health, right? That'll make her early game even a little stronger.
Yeah, she's one of the most cheesy like 80 carries in the game in the laning phase, if not the cheesiest. I'd say like her,
Um,
Lucian, and Tristana probably the most cheesiest level
you
one,
wouldn't go
two,
with like
three.
Draven or Neela?
Yeah, Draven. Well, I mean, it just depends how aggressive Draven is. I wouldn't say he's inherently cheesy because he just doesn't have the gap closer of the three I mentioned. Yeah,
Okay.
Neela can definitely be a little cheesy. I just don't think
They've added some
Tristana,
booted top
Samira,
lane
and
a lot.
Lucian though are just the ones that have the cheesiest follow up for like literally anything their support does. That's
That's
why I would
true.
say that they're like so brain dead cheesy. Like you better be counting those minions because you know it's coming. That's how cheesy those
Oh yeah, the
champions
level
are.
two,
Yeah,
the level two twist.
every
Oh yeah.
game. I know, like bot lane has just devolved to such a cheese lord state, in my opinion.
All right, stop complaining about Lee. We don't have time.
All right, next up, we got Trendemir. Full
Yeah, this is an odd
disclosure.
one, isn't it?
Well, that's the funny thing. I actually had a range buff for Trendemir in my rework video that we're going to do after
Oh,
this. It's funny this is what they chose to do.
that is really funny. Just as a little bit of inside baseball, we are about to do our champion judgment for Tryndamere. We're going to discuss what's right and wrong with him and rework his entire kit, possibly.
Yeah.
In about an hour, back to back, we're doing them. So I don't know what Chrissy's doing. Chrissy doesn't know what I'm doing, but I guess I just found out the first thing. You're going to be increasing his attack range.
Yes, but in my version, it's going to make a lot more sense. And this current version of Trendemir, this is absolutely stupid and abusive. For him to
Okay.
have any extra like auto attack range for a melee champion can be extremely abusive against another melee champion. And this is unacceptable. For him to have this auto attack range for the type of he's not like Tom Kench or Aurelia where they're more around like their abilities, so they have a ridiculous auto attack range. It doesn't feel as bad. But for someone who's like a dedicated auto attacker that's going to be able to like clip you this much from this high of an auto attack range, this is going to be so much more annoying of a change than anyone realizes to lane against Trendemir after this change.
Yeah, you make some really good points. Speaking of Aurelia, who we were saying is more ability based, her auto attack range is 200. I looked it up.
I know that's why I like mentioned
Yeah,
her.
but like that's reasonable. You're right because it's more about hitting her abilities. Master Yi is another good example of like a 175 straight up auto attacker. That there are actually a bunch. You have like a pretty even spread between like 125s, 150s, and 175s. Among the melees, and then you have some other weird ranges beyond
Yes,
175.
but I would argue that all of the highest melee ones have a kind of caveat based on the type of champion they are. I'd be willing to bet that there's very few ones that are very high that have a more auto attack centric kit.
Yeah. There's a few that are at 175, and there's none that are higher that are more auto attack centric. If I remember correctly. So you make some good points, and so you think this is going to be like a overall, even though he lost 4 base attack damage, you think this is going to be like significant power up for him?
Oh, this is an absolute lane dominant buff. Yes, he
Yeah.
lost 4 AD, but his Q gives him like 10 to like 45 throughout the
Yeah.
game. So that's kind of inconsequential.
Yeah, and
Obviously,
also
any.
worth noting on that point is that he actually has no base AD ratios anywhere in his kit. So it's not like this is taking down the power of any of his abilities to lose AD. It's literally just 4 auto attack damage, up to 8 if he crits.
True, and obviously his cheese all in potential is going to be somewhat diminished, but the the amount, and I play mostly top lane the last few years. The amount of ease
Go on.
this is going to increase, like his trading potential and like the back and forth annoyance of dealing with Trendemir. This is going to give him. This is such a huge buff for a champion that's as one dimensional as Trendemir is.
Yeah, I mean,
You won't
you know,
notice
not
it, but you'll see it. You won't know why it happened,
we'll even
but
kind of notice it when you go for a minion and he auto attacks you and you can't trade back with him.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah. And he's going to auto
yeah,
attack you basically through the minion line with this auto attack range. I'm
yeah.
not kidding. He'll hit you like,
Pretty
oh,
big.
you can hit him like over the melee and caster minions when you have like 175.
And then also he'll cancel less autos this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're convincing me this is even bigger than I thought. Like I figured overall this would be like a little bit of a buff. No,
I'm
this yeah,
I'm only
you
making
make it
as
up.
big a deal because of what Trendemir is, like a one-dimensional stat check champion.
Hmm.
If it was like someone like Mordekaiser, this wouldn't really be a big deal or anything because Mordekaiser is so much more ability centric. But because if this, I would be making the same case if this was like Jax or something. Even though even Jax wouldn't be as disgusting as this is on Trendemir.
You know offhand what
Trendemir,
Jackson's range is? Because I don't.
I don't know, but I'm sure it's probably close to 125.
Okay.
I'm sure it's less than this.
I love the wording close to 125. Like let me get 150 in my my win column as well.
It's probably 125, I imagine.
It might be. It might be.
I doubt it's even 150. But his W gives him bonus range on his autos, so it's whatever. Anyway, the reason why this is so crazy is because Trendemir is such a stat checky champion. And such an active, like trading champion in the early laning phase.
Agreed. And in his current state, I mean, he's just such a cheesy champion that like I don't like seeing him. Not only a cheesy champion, but also one that's not really helpful to have on your team, even though he's good. Like I'm not mad with having a Tryndamere on my team, just frustrated.
He's not really good. It all just comes down to who can match him after the laning phase is over. And you either have someone that can match him, not beat him, but just kind of bend over and take it, or
Yeah.
he just marches on towards your inhibitor. You either have someone who can match him or you don't.
Yeah, and that's why he's like useful for a team, but he doesn't really help any of his teammates at all.
Yeah. Anyway,
So
enough of
yeah,
that. We can talk about him later.
sure.
All right, next up, we've got Twisted Fate, the perennial punching bag
Your favorite.
of mid lane. We got a
Yeah.
really nice buff here for his Q. Hopefully, this will help him once again one-shot the caster minions when they're marching in the straight line. He used to be able to do that a long time ago. Now he has to be really ahead of the curve to do the same thing with his Q. I'm
Mhm.
always for more buffs with Twisted Fate, so I'm happy to see this. Anything to make him like more of a laning phase threat and more of a late game monster, of which he's neither.
Yeah, I mean, he does more damage than he used to do. The roaming is obviously still very helpful. I forget whether they've buffed his stun at all in the last couple of years, but
They buffed
that's
the
obviously a
damage.
nice thing to have. They definitely buffed the damage on the bigger card, but the stun duration is the same.
Yeah, I think it's always been like
Okay.
1.5 or something. Actually,
Yeah.
no, I think it scales with ranks in the ability.
And then the Everfrost also was a nice buff to Twisted Fate, just the existence of Everfrost. So he's been doing a little bit better in the last few years than he has in the past. And yeah, I mean, I think this little buff on wildcards is nice. If you're really good TF, you can figure out ways to actually hit your wildcard on enemy champs without them walking into it by mistake.
Yeah. Okay, next up we got Vex, who,
Hmm.
kind of like Kane, I also think came out in a very balanced state and has had a good run of things since she came into the game. I feel like the champion is very balanced. At the same time, I don't think she's too overly dependent on pick potential, like, say, Zoe or Elise that we were talking about earlier. Okay, we got some bonus damage on her Q. This is very
Hmm.
nice. It did get nerfed a little bit as soon as she came out. The ratio got hit a bit. Then we got a reduced cooldown on her defensive ability that instantly fears people and gives her a shield if her passive's up. Really like that one. I don't feel like it's overly too strong to be on such a high cooldown, especially when you got something like Lysandra, who has almost an identical ability with a much lower cooldown on
Hmm.
Ring of Frost. And then we've got some quality of life where it just tells people who she marked with the first half of her ultimate.
Yeah, I think that the buff to W in particular is probably the biggest part of this. A lot of people sleep on how big that shield can be, not to mention like really good damage. And to reduce the cooldown on a skill that, at least in the past, she's usually maxed second. Um, Probably will continue to max second if I had to guess. Even though there's a case to be made, or at least more of a case to be made now for maxing it last, since you're getting
Uh,
less cooldown reduction per rank.
yeah, you definitely want to max it second. Her E is kind
Yeah,
of pathetic.
yeah, that's true. Um, but yeah, to get basically for the first like 60% of the game, you're getting 4 seconds less cooldown on the W, which is a really good defensive and pretty good offensive ability. That's big. I was a little bit surprised. I don't see Vex too much, but I was a little bit surprised that she's getting buffs since of the mages that you would normally see in the game, she's really one of the best against assassins, and assassins are seen a lot right now.
You know, that was like the whole purpose of her design kit. I don't feel like
Hmm.
it actually accomplished that specific goal very well, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, I still think she is a well designed champion who is
Uh-huh.
kind of a throwback to like the 2012, 13, 14 design uh, uh, design kind of idea philosophy of the old days. She feels like
Mhm.
a champion that could have came out like 8 or 9 years ago. Is what I'm saying,
Yeah, I see what you're saying
which
with
I
that, right?
like.
Nothing really complicated, not like tons of ridiculous mobility or overloading in the kit. Just like a few strong things that she does well. It does feel a little bit throwbacky in a good way.
One
I also like that she's a mage with a reset. Not too many mages have that.
One thing I'd like to mention is the her Q and her W both activate the damage on her passive, so it's not reflected here, but all that stuff stacks together. That's why her Q looks like it always hits a lot harder than it really does, because her passive's
Good
usually
point.
up.
That's a good point. And then the Ludens doesn't hurt either.
Yes. Okay, next up we got Vi, who got a few nerfs when that time came around to nerf all of the shields and all that other crap in the game. But
Yeah.
now she's got a reversion of that plus a little extra on Blast Shield, and now this is pretty generous. Unfortunately, she also lost some killing potential, but the Blast Shield is super nice, I have to say.
Yeah.
The fact that her ultimate lost some damage, I don't feel like is a huge deal. A lot of her
It's a lot of
damage
damage.
is tied up into denting blows and her E,
Yeah, that's true.
so I don't think it's as huge a deal that her ultimate got nerfed a bit, as long as it still functions as consistently as it always has.
Yeah, to me, this is just a slight buff overall. If you look at kind of the amount of health she might get from two blast shields, which a good Vi will be able to proc in fights. You're probably talking, probably getting about 120 health more. A little bit more reliability on Relentless Force to make sure that you've always got two charges up when you're entering a fight. Compare that against maybe like 120, 140 less damage on her ult, which you're not always going to have in a fight anyway. And this is overall a little bit of a buff. But I think what they're trying to do here is to stop Vise from going so heavy into damage and even lethality. I've seen a lot of Vise build lately. I've been in few games where I've seen the Vi just like maybe they've got like 2, 3, 4 kills mid game, and then they gank you, and you're dead in like a second and a half, or they even like run into you in jungle 1-on-1, and you're dead in a couple seconds, and you just like look at the death recap, like, whoa, really? That much damage?
Yeah,
Um,
she scales really well with AD.
can't think of any time since I started playing League that I've seen Vi actually making kills so quickly.
Well,
Um,
she always could. People just used to build her more conservatively.
Yeah, that's true. And I think like just some of the changes to the items and mechanics have allowed her to be this just like absolute 80 lethality wrecking ball. And so it looks like what they're trying to do is pull back a little bit on that and say, guys, build Vi as a bruiser, please. And maybe this'll get her back there. I don't know.
I doubt it, because they didn't really nerf her in the damage that would have mattered. As
Um,
long as the max health
right,
shred
but they
on
are rewarding tanky builds.
yes, but as long
Uh-huh.
as the damage remains the same on the scaling with Denting Blows' max health shred
Uh-huh.
and the huge damage on her Q, I feel like there's always going to be an incentive for her to have pretty heavy AD.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair argument to make, and we'll see what players end up doing. But I do think that the extra reward for bruisery tanky builds should not be ignored.
Okay, next up, we've got Xerath, we've got less mana, we've
We got
got
less mana, more mana, and then less mana, respectively.
yes.
I'll tell you what I think they're trying to do. I'll tell you what I think they're trying to do here. They're trying to push Xerath a little bit more back into mid lane, because right now he's only seen as a support.
That's a shame because he's a great mid laner.
He's good. I mean, we talked a few patches ago, right, about how he often puts up those like absurd KDAs, but doesn't get your team the win. And I feel like he's probably a little weaker now than usual, just because of the presence of assassins who are going to be able to get around his skill shots. So what they did here is they're trying to just give him a little bit more reward for killing minions with the cooldown refund on his passive. And then the W, which is kind of like the thing that the support Xerath uses the most, that the mid lane uses a little bit less, is going to cost a little bit more mana.
Yep. That sounds about right. Okay, next up we got Xin Zhao. And this feels like something I would have changed myself because I'm always into those more bruiser centric tank builds for the champions that people tend to index more killing power into. And instead of getting flat, now flat heal from every third strike, now he just heals for a percentage of his maximum health, which I wouldn't be surprised if they did enough math for this to equate to roughly the same amount. From not building health items, if just his base health, this probably equates close to the base numbers. But obviously, if you start building him with a lot more tanky, this is going to be way stronger than it was before.
I don't know. I generally like to look at champs. Maybe like level like 6, they might have 1,500 health. Level 18, they might have 3,000. And granted, I think I'm including like a couple of items in there. But just taking those as like general numbers, you're talking probably at the very beginning of the game, you're definitely talking a better heal. Mid game, it's probably about even, and late game, you're getting a much better heal as well, because he's not going to have 500 AD late game to compensate for the maximum health ratio. And so I would say this is a buff. But for the reasons for this, just see what we said about Vi, just to a lesser extent.
Yeah, I like this change.
Me too.
Even if it no longer has any AD scaling, I like this change. And you're
Yeah,
right,
I mean,
it will be way stronger at level 1.
Yeah, and I mean, Xin Shao will still scale well with AD in general, just not his heal on determination.
Yep. All right.
And I did just want to point out this Zed bug fix, which I found pretty funny. The model's lower body for the Project Zed skin no longer becomes frozen in motion when performing the empowered attack. So I'm just imagining like this, this like wireframe Zed thrusting his groin over and over. He can't stop.
Well, reason this is because his passive is one of those uncancelable auto attacks once it's like
Oh, nice.
in motion, so I'm sure that contributed to the silliness.
It's just such a funny image in my mind's eye. So thank you for letting me get that in.
All right, our last champion is Zoe, and we have
Mhm.
some real head scratchers here, as usual with any change to Zoe these last few years. We have somehow a longer sleep duration,
Mhm.
and now she just gets the full magic pen essentially on this ability with 1 point in it, making it so she can afford to max this last essentially,
Oh, okay,
and
yeah,
now she
yeah.
can max her W second and get more of the summoner item thingies for free off minions instead of this. Don't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
if I like this at all, especially with how for a for a champion that's all about catch potential, she's surprisingly good in the laning phase. If you have a really good Zoe behind the wheel, she can be really obnoxious in the lane. Yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of this. I don't even think she needs Magic Pen, to be honest. I mean, her
Um,
damage is so absurd.
well, she does. With zero magic pen, she'd be very underpowered if you didn't change her other numbers. But yeah, the sleep is a little bit of a head scratcher. Like, usually you're gonna wake them up before 2.25 seconds anyway. But the fact that you can use this without great timing and then just have your teammates catch up, and then you all just all in the person that you put to sleep. Um, yeah, that part feels a little bit unnecessary. And then also, yeah, I had kind of like been thinking that the intent was to just allow the 30% magic resist at level 1 instead of forcing it to scale up throughout the game. But you're right, this also allows you to rank this last, and
Yes,
that feels a little bit cheesy.
it is kind of a mistake because her W is balanced around having absolutely pathetic damage, but having the
Hmm.
utility of picking up all those extra summoner and item actives. So the weak point was maxing it second really made no sense because the damage is so bad it doesn't make sense to trade with it. But now that you
Yeah.
get the best effects from putting 1 point into her E, there's no reason not to max her W second.
No, I don't mind her getting a little bit of buffs in general. I would say lately she's probably been a slightly below average mid laner. But yeah, I agree that it's a little bit head scratching that this is where they decided to do it.
All right, next up, we've got some pretty small item changes. Not really want to go into a lot of these that just shake up the recipe, so let's just talk about the juicy ones. First
Okay.
up, we got Bloodthirster. Now you get the bonus stats at 70% of your max health instead of being half dead. I like that. It probably made more sense for it to be 50, but this is probably in a reaction to like not really feeling as fun as a purchase after it lost its old effect, I imagine. So now you get it at 70% health instead of 50, so I like that, I guess.
Um, well, you have to be above that threshold. This is a nerf, isn't it? Yes, this is a nerf. You lose it at 70% health.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I misread that.
Yeah.
Okay, then fuck Riot then.
With that said though, like you hear like 50% maximum health to 70% maximum health. Sounds so big, but essentially that's just the range. So instead of 50 to 100% of your health, it's now 70 to 100%. That you get an extra 10 to 40 bonus attack damage. You're probably only gonna be in that range. Is that even right? 10 to 40? Yeah. You're probably only going to be in that range maybe 10 to 15% of the time. Quite often you're going to be above 70% anyway, or you're going to be pretty low. And so, like, to me, this is a smaller nerf than -5 AD would be. It's not really that big of a deal.
Okie dokie. Gonna skip these kind of goofy recipe changes.
That's
Next
fair.
up, we've got a meaning, kind of a cool change to Dustblade. Now, when you enter the
Uh huh.
obscured new thing that you get when you kill someone, now it just destroys everything that was going to hit you. So that's kind of cool.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
auto attacks, targeted abilities. Like this would work on Annie's Q, for example.
Wait
Uh,
a minute. No longer grants invulnerability?
I thought it was just untargetability now.
Well, it looks like they just got rid of that. I mean, you were invulnerable and untargetable except the turrets, I think, until dispatch.
I don't think you were ever invulnerable. I think you were just untargetable.
I'm
But
I'm
this thing's been
pretty sure
changed so
you
many
were
times, though.
invulnerable. I'm pretty sure you were invulnerable. Um, if you want, I can check it while we talk about the other stuff, but I'm like 98% sure.
Whatever.
Um, like you were not going to be damaged. So now if there's like, now if there's like a an AoE on the ground or just like a a brand W coming at you or something like that, anything that's not a projectile, you're going to be hit by it. Like this actually I think is a pretty big nerf.
I think that's all. I thought that was already how it was supposed to be working. Like you could get hit by AoEs, but you couldn't be hit by stuff like Annie's Q because you actually have to click on the person to do that.
I'm almost sure that you were actually invulnerable for 1.5 seconds.
If that was the case, that must have been some kind of bug or something because I know at one point it was changed to just being untargetable.
You sure you're
Whatever.
not thinking of the Akali Shroud?
No, I'm positive
Okay.
because originally you were just invisible, and then when they got reworked, then you were untargetable, and it didn't. You couldn't refresh it a
You
million
were
times.
untargetable and invulnerable, I think.
Whatever.
Ah, yeah. I mean, okay, so if you're right, then this is actually a little bit of a buff, which is cool that the projectiles are destroyed. If I'm right, most of the projectile, like an auto attack, was just going to be aimed at you anyway, and you were going to be invulnerable to it. And all of these other types of skills that are not like targeted attacks um, or projectiles can now hit you when last patch they couldn't. Dustblade's been nerfed several times since they essentially reworked it to give you this this period after you make a kill. And I think this is just one in a line of long nerfs because it's just crowding out the other assassin items.
I know they need to buff Yumu's again.
Ugh. Make it even more of a big stat stick?
Yes.
Not here for that. Speaking of big nerfs, Even Shroud. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm kind of depressed to see this. In my personal opinion, I think this is the go-to mythic for tank supports that don't do any damage, and I feel this is their way of kind of contributing to the game by having this powerful effect. I feel like this is completely unwarranted, to be honest. It's
Uh-huh.
always been, it's a relatively new item. I think it's always been kind of the standout tank mythic for supports for a very long time, and maybe that's why it's getting nerfed. So by it being shittier, the other mythics look good by comparison. That's standard Riot rationalization.
Yeah,
So,
might be that. Like, remember, this is a support mythic. You don't buy support mythics for the stats. Like the effect, the coruscation, which is all your teammates as well as you deal that percentage more. It used to be 10% more to whatever champ you immobilize or immobilizes you. Do you ever use it for the immobilizes you, or do you just use it on champions that can immobilize enemies? Because that's what I do.
there's people that have been taking this top now and then. You probably won't have much of a reason to take it now that it's got this big nerf on it. But
Yeah.
I did take it on Shen a couple times just for fun.
Okay, but that's also like
I see
because
it on
you're doing
Urgot a lot top because
you're immobilizing
he
them.
can proc it on himself. So
Yeah.
Urgot's like this. I see this on Urgot a lot.
Yeah, it's like you know, we're losing 30% of the majority of this item's value here. This is huge. I used to love taking this on Leona. Braum. If I played Rel, I would be taking it on Rel. Like you said, pretty much all the tank supports. And now, I mean, I don't even think I'm going to take it on Leona. Like, I don't think I'm going to take it on anyone.
No, you say that, but what it still does is it's just better than what the other tank
7%
mythics
more?
do.
I mean, at that point, you might as well just switch over to Radiant Virtue, I think.
I wish that was good enough.
And they've made it much better.
I want them to just make that a legendary so I can take that on Shen.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool. Like, just get rid of Redemption or make that into a mythic that no one will buy. And then, yeah, make that into a legendary. Make the Radiant Virtue something we can buy.
My opinion,
But,
though, is even with this nerf, I think most tanks will still buy this just because they'll feel like the other options don't feel as fun or impactful, even if that might be true in some case.
and then for all the non-tank supports, you basically want to go, well, occasionally like an AP item if you're like a Zyra or a Lux or something. Besides that, you go Echoes of Helia. Yeah, this is just so sad. I think this is going to. I think we'll probably see a buff to this item at some point before the season ends. But for now, like I think they've basically removed it from relevance.
Well, it was 8 or 9 during its whole lifetime, and then recently it got buffed to 10, so at one point they thought it should be stronger. So now it's weaker than it ever was.
Yeah, 7 is disgusting.
Alright, next up we got Gore Drinker. We've got 100 more health for this item, and I swear this item's health has gone up and down about 100 times itself. So
Yeah, probably
take that
with
what you will.
Probably alongside the general state of juggernauts in the game, as well as the how in favor the Stridebreaker is.
Yes. For what it does, though, I feel like 400 is both the perfect amount and the max amount that this item should have.
Agreed. It's very reasonable.
All right. Next up,
I apologize. Let's pause for a minute.
Okie dokie. All right. Next up, we got Immortal Shield Bow. And it's my opinion that Immortal Shield Bow has actually been the biggest loser of the items that got downgraded to legendaries. I feel like with its loss of the synergy, the loss in stats, and the lackluster shield effect, and the loss of attack speed when you get the shield and all that stuff, I feel like this one has literally been the worst of those items. Now, it is getting a buff here, so that is nice. I still feel strongly about what I just said about it, though.
It's been shocking. I mean, I gotta just admit I made a bad call on this one. I thought that nerfing it to and I still think in like a design sense it's bad, but I thought it was also going to be very overpowered when they nerfed it from mythic status, and it wasn't. Like that was shocking to me. And the fact that you can build another mythic item and shield bow, and it's not like an auto win. Yep, this is a nice looking buff. Remember that you're never going to have this at level 1 anyway. It's almost never going to be your first item. So the time you can actually get this, realistically, by the earliest, you're going to be probably about level 10. So think of this as maybe like a 40 extra shield when you first get it. And then by the end of the game, it's break even.
Yeah, the only cool thing about this item is they didn't realize that when they downgraded this item from a mythic to a legendary, then now you can build this simultaneously with all of the other lifesteal items, and you can actually just run like a 5 or 6 lifesteal item build, which I do sometimes in ARAM because it's hilarious.
How much steel do you get up to?
You can get like 40 or 50, and then you just build Spirit Visage like 6, so it's essentially like 65 or something.
Nice.
Yeah, it's real funny to do like an ARAM or on some 80 carries when you're like doing really well and you can rush Bloodthirster or something silly.
Or you can be Warwick and have 400 lifesteal.
Well, you don't want to do it on him because he needs the tankiness, but you can get away with it.
I didn't actually mean the lifesteal, but you know what I mean.
So many, in the old days, you could never get away with it because lifesteal items never had critical strike. But now that you have Bloodthirster and Shieldbow that both also give critical strike, you can kind of get away with doing it on a number of 80 carries legit, even in like ranked games.
Pretty cheeselord, though.
It is really cheesy, but it also makes you feel really good when people try to all-in you, and you're like, nope, I just boop, 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 boop. You know, can't, no, yeah. Sir.
I mean, all the steel plus the, shield of 500 is nothing to sneeze at.
You remember, like, when we first met, I was playing Graves Bot when they had Warlords of
I will
Bloodlust?
never forget that, and
Yeah.
your all lifesteal rune pitch.
Yeah, they had Warlord's Bloodlust as a keystone back then, and that was
Yep.
before it was nerfed. I was playing it in its most broken state back then, and it was just hilarious. Good times.
Yeah.
Okay, blah blah blah. Okay, next up we got Spear of Sojin here. We've got less AD, way more health, and then the base amount of ability haste is going through the roof, but then the scaling is getting cut in half. Don't know where I feel about this. Would you say this is power neutral?
This was really hard for me to figure out, honestly.
It's a lot of extra health.
Well, it's what they're clearly trying to do here, right? Between that and the way that they changed the base and the AD ratio, is they're trying to make this much more appealing for like tanky bruisers, and less so for anybody that's not tanky.
Well, I'm going to say that this is a buff just because as soon as you buy it, it already gives more ability haste than any other item in the game with 36. So I think it's a buff overall. The 36 ability haste, if you're melee, of course, and the extra
By the time you have 100
health.
bonus AD, it's giving you less than it did before.
What do you mean?
By the time you have 100 bonus AD, the total amount of basic ability. Oh, wait a minute. The ability haste is or isn't. No, it is. It is. I'm right.
Yes, the base amount. The base
100
amount went up though, and they didn't mess with
The base amount went up by 4%, and then the AD ratio went down by 4% per 100 bonus AD.
I think you're misreading part of it.
It's possible that I am. So what I think is
the
happening...
stat portion is staying at 20. We don't see that here. That's the part you're getting from Caulfield's Warhammer and Kindle Gem. That's 20, and then the base amount went up by double, so that's 36 as soon as you buy it.
It went up by 8% for melee, it's not 4.
And then but the ratio is the only thing that got nerfed, really.
Yeah, so at 200 bonus AD, which is a lot, it becomes break even on the basic ability haste. Okay.
Well, break even with what though?
Break even with the amount you were getting before this patch of basic ability haste.
But
you used to get 8 extra basic ability haste per 100 bonus AD that you had as a melee or 6 for ranged. Okay. Now you're getting 4 per 100 bonus AD or 3 for ranged, but as you said, the base amount went up by 8.
All right.
So at 200 bonus AD, this is break even.
You can't call it break even if it's starting with the same amount that it did before.
At 200 bonus AD, you were getting 24 extra basic ability haste, which is the same that you would have gotten at 200 bonus AD last patch.
What I'm saying is you had 28 before, now you have 36. So just because they nerf the ratio doesn't mean this item has to play some kind of catch up because the starting strength is way better than it was before.
At 200 bonus AD before, you would have had
It's stronger 24. Initially. What you're just saying is it doesn't get as strong as it could have gone now.
Well, right. But I'm comparing it to what you would have had last patch. If you have 260 bonus AD at a given point in the game, yeah, you would prefer to have the look of it last patch. But overall, to answer your question, I think this is a buff. 150 health is more valuable than 5 attack damage for most champs, and it's a long time before it breaks even, or before you hit the break even point. Before that point, you have more basic ability haste with this item. So yeah, I agree with you. This is a buff.
Okay. Next up, we got Static Shiv. For all those LeBlanc users apparently out there, this is getting cut in half with its HAP. Probably never should have had an AP ratio to begin with, though.
I agree with you. It's silly to give this an AP ratio. It created some real degeneracy with, when it had... I forget what the original AP ratio was. I think it was much higher than 30.
Oh, yeah.
may have been 50 or 60 when they first reworked it.
They need to give it
And
an AD ratio is what they need.
yeah, and you had shit like Vagar mid, building this and Lichbane. Anyway, I think Echo, Diana are a couple more of those AP mid champs that do use this sometimes.
At least they use autos.
Yeah, right. It's so silly. It's kind of a silly item. Kaisa also being hurt a little bit by this. Kaisa always builds the static shift, whether she's mid or ADC. Yeah, it's silly to have an AP ratio in the first place on this. I think the item is a little bit silly. If a champ is not designed for wave clear, that's part of their design. Don't try to get around that.
I don't know
It
if
is
I
what
agree
it
with
is.
that design philosophy. By that logic, you should take like Ludens and like Sunfire Cape out of like the game and stuff.
I don't think that's true. I think Loons and Sunfire usually lean into what champs want to do already. It's just like if a champ is designed to have a certain weakness, I guess Sunfire Cape the weakness could be wave clear. Ludens, it's really more about burst damage. Um, but yeah, I don't know. There are certain champs that are like designed around their weakness, and when there's a simple item that gets rid of that weakness, that can be problematic.
Moral of the story: why doesn't it
Mm-hmm.
have an AD ratio?
I, Amen to that, brother. Like AP ratio on Static Shiv is stupid. Make it 0%. Give it a 15% AD ratio. We're good.
All right. Lastly, we have Stride Breaker, who is just getting a health buff, and that is it. I feel
Yep.
like this is the least popular of the Bruiser mythics, though.
Yeah.
Even though it's
It's
good,
a weak item.
I don't think it's weak.
You don't think it's
It's
weak?
just more niche.
Back when it gave you a movement boost
It
for
still
using
does.
the active,
Oh.
it was a popular and very good item. It's lost a lot of popularity since then.
I don't think it ever gave you movement speed. It gives you movement speed when you auto attack people because it's built out of phase or whatever.
I'm pretty sure Stride Breaker for like the first year gave you movement speed when you use the active.
No, it would make you. In the old days, you'd have to stand still to use it, though. Now you can use it while you're moving to slow people.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I don't think it ever gave movement speed, though, because it also simultaneously slowed people, so I don't think it would
Yeah,
have both.
I think that was kind of the point of it. I could be wrong.
Alright, that does it for. Oh, wait, there's some runes down here. Shut me up.
And a really important summoner fix as well.
Alright, let's talk about this futures market. We got a big nerf here. Now you can't borrow as much as early, and now you have to wait like 15 minutes to borrow the same amount that you were to rush your mythic if you are one of those people. Feel like this
Mhm.
is something I only see like Fiora's take so they can get Ravenous Hunter like super fast and be extra cheesy.
Yeah, I really dislike this rune in terms of it's almost a trap to use, especially since you have to pay the extra money on the back end. Um, this will get you your third, fourth item quicker, but often the reason you want futures market in the first place is to get an advantage early when a couple hundred gold really will matter.
Yeah, I
Um,
think
I,
this
I think,
change completely disincentivized the only reason people were taking this, and that's to get whatever your first item is really fast.
yeah, I mean it gives you a little bit more of a reason to try and use it late, but I still don't like it as an item or as a rune to take.
Yep.
Um, Trying to think if they got rid of the lending fee, then essentially it would just be giving you free gold, right? So they have to have some type of lending fee.
Let's just pretend it doesn't exist, like a treasure hunter.
That's a good idea.
Okay, next up, heal no longer fails to grant the bonus movement speed to the affected ally if the ally did not have heal equipped themselves.
Yeah,
Does
so
this just
essentially,
mean if people with double heal, sometimes both of them would not get the movement speed?
I think what this means is that if you used heal on an ally, and they're not also going to have heal on them, right? So like if if you're the ADC with heal, and you use heal on your ally who has ghost or ignite or exhaust or whatever, they will get the healing but not the movement speed. That's pretty big. So there were a couple times I would use heal in a chase, and it felt like it wasn't doing anything, but I was like, I must be imagining that. No, I was actually essentially accomplishing nothing by using heal to help my ally chase down an enemy. So that has been fixed. That is good. Because the movement speed on heal for your ally is really important.
Well, I never saw that one happen before. And then lastly, they gave the same aggro bar that the big monster camps have to the dragon.
Yeah, nice little change there.
Most people can kind of have this in their mind how far it's supposed to be able to go, but now for the goofers, you can just look at the bar.
Yeah, and I do like that if you like bring it out of the leash range for just a second, you can now get it back in without having all of the aggression go haywire and reset. Nice little changes to that.
Well, okay, that does it for 13.17, and we're immediately going to do our Tryndamere Champion Judgment video after this. So I will be uploading 2 things tonight. Could take me a while, though. I have a bit of a headache, so we'll see what I upload.
I guess if you're hearing this, the Tryndamere is already up, and we will see you there.
See you guys.
All right.
All right, welcome to part 3. Have some internet problems or Discord's freaking out. It's probably my fault since my internet's been really ghetto the last few months. Next up, we got Silas, who's getting more mana. I actually do think he's pretty mana hungry early on. I don't think it's his problem in the late game, though.
Yeah, agreed. He actually does run out of mana in a lot of the early trades early on. It's the only way that he can really fight, and this will let him basically use one more skill every time he comes back from Biss.
Yep.
He'll have one more skill before he runs Zoom. It's a small buff, but it's a nice buff for him.
Yeah, not a lot to say about that. Next up, we got some stat buffs to Tristana. Let's see, we got less health, more armor per level, and
less magic resist.
Yeah, I don't really know what to think about that.
Basically, they went nowhere with this. This is like some corporate executive basically hiring a bunch of accountants to make it look like the money went to one division instead of another, so that they were like profitable. But really, it didn't do anything to the business.
I'd say 3 of these changes are pretty meaningless. I think the only one of consequence is her gaining base armor, because for an AD carry, any bit of armor to mitigate the flat shred of lethality, I think, is impactful. So I think that's the only one of consequence.
Yeah, that's 4 base armor. At the beginning of the game, you're probably taking more damage from the support than you are from the ADC.
But Serrated Dirk is like 10 armor spend, basically.
Yeah, later on. But even that, means she's taking maybe like 3% less damage, but she also has 3% less health. This really feels like a nothing burger to me. The one thing I might guess, and I haven't seen it much lately, but have you seen Tristana mid, maybe? I'm thinking maybe they're trying to make her worse against mages?
That was actually a thing like 2 years ago. People were busting out like Tristana and Lucian. Just because they both are so fucking aggro and have such an all-in against the mages. I
haven't seen it recently, but I'm wondering if that could possibly be the case, because as far as ADC Tristana, in the laning phase and really through the entire game, this is nothing. This is like a zero-sum change.
It's not a buff.
Yeah, I really think this is a zero-sum change. The only thing I can guess is they're trying to make her worse against mages mid, and even then, I haven't seen her mid more than once or twice in the last year.
Alright.
Another weird one.
I would say it's a net nerf instead of power neutral, as you like to say.
Okay. I would say it's completely power neutral myself.
Well, I think the base armor is more impactful in the laning phase, even if the armor growth eventually compensates for that. So that's the
Oh
part of
no,
the game.
they're giving her more armor and more armor growth.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They're
I'm saying
taking
it's
yeah.
more impactful. You know,
Yeah, I'm just saying there's no like compensation. The compensation is they're getting rid of the MR and they're getting rid of health.
I hear you.
Okay. So you think it's a buff? I think it's a nothing burger.
Okie dokie. Next up, we got Wukong, and they decided to make his Q cost no mana. That's okay, because it's always up anyway.
Uh-huh.
And then there's like a bug on my screen. I assume this is a change to his W clone thing. The text on my screen is kind of messed up with this ability for some reason.
Warrior Trister?
Yeah.
It says mana cost is reduced to 60 to 40 from 80 to 40. So at the earlier ranks, it costs less mana. So this is just basically more mana for Weezle all around.
Yeah, nobody really plays him top anymore. He's basically just a cheese lord full AD jungler now.
Yeah, it's mostly in the jungler, and more often than not, I actually see him succeed there.
There was a time where this champion was kind of like an off tank or a bruiser in the old days. Those
Oh
times.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
moved on to Talon levels of play though.
Actually, in Arena, I've seen him kind of go bruiser with some success as well. But yeah, as far as the Rift, he's more of a burst assassin type.
Okie dokie. That'll do it for the champion changes. Next up, some very inconsequential item changes. Ace, first up, we've got Axiom Arc,
Uh-huh.
which got a big nerf in the other patch that really limited its user base, but now they're giving the baseline effect a big, or I guess a bit of a buff.
Didn't
Now
we
that it,
decide that? Sorry, go on.
well, the rest of the portion of the ability now scales only with lethality now, where it was strong enough to be picked up as a one-off item on just about any AD champion that
Uh-huh.
wanted to abuse it. Uh, it's probably still the case that this is still kind of not worth getting on anyone that doesn't build like full lethality, though, even with this buff.
Well, I think when we looked at this change, we actually worked out the numbers, and because it gives you 18 lethality in itself, it was like you get one more lethality item, and you're breaking even, and then beyond that, you actually do better than when it used to refund. Was it 25% of your total cooldown? Was it 30?
I don't remember, but it was good enough to be a one-off item on someone who would not build any other lethality items.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely worse as a one-off now. But what we're going to see with all of these item changes is that everything except Duskblade of Drakthar for Assassins basically picked up a small buff, and then Duskblade got a nerf. So just for that, I think there's going to be a lot of Assassins shifting from Duskblade, which was just so good, to Axiom Arc. And yeah, now that it's giving you a 10% cooldown plus 0.4% per lethality, which just from this one item is another 7%. This really isn't bad.
Well, I'd like to say one thing. You said switch, where Axiom Arc is not a mythic like Duskblade is. So there's no like this or
Now,
that
speaking of
decision.
Duskblade,
Well, you made it sound like both of them are mythics and you have to choose one or the other. One's a legendary and one's a mythic, so. Know what I mean? Oh, for God's sakes. Alright, here we are with part 4 of 16 or 13.16, and last thing I said is you were saying how they would have to switch from Dustblade to Axiom Arc, and before it cut out I explained that only Dustblade is a mythic and Axiom Arc is a legendary, so you don't have to switch. You can still get them
that's
both.
right. That's right. Axiom Arc's not not a mythic. I keep thinking it is.
It was Prowler's Claw that got downgraded.
Yes, yes. I don't know why I was thinking that. Sorry, but yeah. So I think Axiom Arc is still looking pretty good in a lot of builds now, especially now that it's 10% lethality, plus 7% just for its baseline value with the lethality it gives you. And I said 10% lethality. I meant the cooldown reduction. Plus bonus for all the other lethality that you stack up. Like, if your champ likes being able to ultimate twice during a fight, this is pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's a cool item. I just feel like it's a little too niche. I wish there was like a version other types of champions could take.
And by the way, for everybody listening to us continually cut out and having to do this video in 4 parts, you should have listened to me at the beginning. I told you to skip this one. But thank you for listening all the way through anyway.
Alright, next up we'll talk about Duskblade now, where the like fade and targetability thing now has a 30-second cooldown instead of 10.
Yeah.
That's probably a good thing, but then the bonus damage went down a tiny bit. At one point it was like 25%, then got nerfed to 20, now it's getting hit again. Overall though, for like the, jump in there and kill someone people, the fact that it just triggers at least once is the important thing.
Yeah, I think this is actually a fairly big nerf to the Duskblade, and I'll tell you why. While generally in a like a really intense, bursty team fight, you're only going to be able to proc this once anyway, whether it's 30 seconds or 10 seconds. What a lot of the really good assassins do is they can proc it once in a team fight, get out of that team fight, and then as it breaks up and people are trying to back and buy their items, or as they're trying to move on to an objective, they find another target, they pick them off there, and then any of their teammates that were near them, if you've got the Duskblade proccing a second time, you can get away from them. And that was actually a nice thing that a lot of the really good assassins did. And I found them doing that in a lot of my games, and honestly, I thought it was pretty cool. Like, I totally agree that Duskblade was an overpowered item and it needed a nerf of some sort, but they nerfed the coolest part of the item. I would have really liked them to just take away some of the, just a little bit of the stats instead, and let the really good assassins do their cool assassin things.
I think it was just fine. I only thought it was broken prior to like the AD item giant overhaul when it would constantly reset. That's when I thought it was too strong.
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that's basically as strong as Kha'Zix's ultimate.
Almost every assassin is going this as their mythic, and even a lot of people who are supposed to be fighters, people like Wukong, are taking things like this. It really was just it was crowding out a lot of the other assassin items and even some of the other AD mythics that were not designed for ADCs, obviously. So I'm glad it got nerfed, but I really wish they would have nerfed the stats rather than the coolest part of Duskblade. That's all.
Okie dokie, next up we got Prowler's Claw, and I actually like this change. It's such kind of a not a super impactful effect like it used to have, that crazy dash where you would dash through people. Those days are gone. Now this is basically just a I kind of think of it as like just an extra keystone almost, what this item does. That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
you just get bonus damage for dashing. Yeah, I feel like that's what, sudden impact, kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's resetting every few seconds and has obviously a very easy condition for a lot of champions to proc. Yeah, they're just improving a little bit, and which is kind of what they did with all these other assassin items that are not called Duskblade.
Yep.
That's all I gotta say.
And then lastly, we've got Serpent's Fang and Umbral Glaive, both gained some lethality. These are kind of the Joker utility lethality items that nobody buys anyway. The ones that you find on like Senna and Pike because they're just so poverty stricken. So now they get a little more bang for their buck, but none of the mainstream mid laners ever take these basically.
Yeah, I agree with you in general. Serpent's Fang definitely has some niche uses in certain games. For if you're going against a set that's getting like 400% of his HP as a shield, if you're going against even like a Vex or something like that, can get a pretty big shield. If you can use the Serpent's Fang against a couple champions that are putting really big shields on themselves, it pays off for itself. But I agree.
I don't really think it's good enough at what it does.
They've buffed it a few times over the years, and I think if you find the right team to use it against, it's actually a quite good item as a fifth item or so.
Yeah.
Umbroglaive, yeah, I don't see that very often. The blackout assassin item used to be very popular, but once it was moved to Umbroglaive, hasn't really been seen much. But worth pointing out. This is more lethality, and if you're using that in combination with Axiom Arc, hey, pretty good.
Yep. Well, that does it for 13.16 finally, and we better get the hell out of here.
Before we have to do a part 5. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're out. See ya.
All right. See you guys next time.